Hi, Niels. How are you?
G'day, Amanda. G'day, everyone. I'm really well, thank you.
Welcome to the Dear Thrive video podcast. Really excited to have you here. And I might just start with a quick intro for our audience. Niels is an innovation expert, author, keynote speaker. Innovation expert is such a bold claim, but his methodologies translates ideas into invoices. The fact that you can look at a business, look at reducing expenditure, uncertainty, and capitalizing on market opportunities. That you're doing lots of great work with Fortune 500 companies and also global businesses. And I think you've touted 15 countries around the globe. And I'm really excited to have you here on this interview and welcome.
Hey, thank you. Gee, I must admit, after an introduction like that, I feel a little bit overwhelmed. But just to correct you, 17 countries and counting.
Amazing. So let's get stuck in. Why don't we delve into your background, what you do, and let's start there.
The long story made short is I used to be a designer. I studied landscape architecture and urban design at university. And my first job, even though I was trained in those things, funnily enough, is I was working in an amusement design company. And I had this amazing mentor who I was working with who said, Nils, design is universal. Whether you're designing a cornice, a building, a landscape, the principles are the same. And I think that lodged somewhere in my brain because, funnily enough, after about 4 or 5 years working in design firms around the world, I realized that I needed to shift. And by chance, I was into things like yoga, personal training, fitness. I went off and did a degree in yoga teaching, a personal training course, shiatsu diploma, and then clients and I was teaching them about how to get fit and healthy. And someone said one day, oh, we really love the way that you think. Can you run a health day for us at our company? And I thought, I don't know what that is, but let me have a bit of a look. And I kind of drafted something up, ran a workshop, and I thought, we love this. And word got around, and I realized that there was something I was doing that people really enjoyed. And so I started writing a book. I ended up getting a co host role on a yoga TV show on Channel 10 in Australia. And that led to a book deal. One day we were coming back from an event and he said, how do you come up with all of your ideas? Well, I said, that's what I was trained to do. You know, we've got to look at a new design. You'd come up with 20 or 30 different ideas. You'd pick your best three, you'd work them up, you'd develop them, you'd pick one, you'd cost it, you'd document it, and you'd go and build it for 20 million or 100 million. And he said, I want you to help me. And the penny dropped because up until then I thought, I'm a designer doing lifestyle. What would I know about business? And at the time, the term, I'm sure we're all familiar with the term design thinking, that did not exist. And essentially, I was pioneering design thinking in business in Australia before it was known as design thinking. And what I was bringing to the table at that time was how do you improve a business just as you were to improve or design a new building or renovate a new landscape or a new urban design? And I started to introduce different modalities, you know, lateral thinking, creative thinking, scientific experimentation, validation, prototyping, all of these things that were emerging at the time. And I guess it led me to a point of realizing that there was no one way to innovate. An analyst, a quant, is really good at looking at data insights and trying to predict what a customer is going to do based on all of the intel that's coming through. Great at insight generation. But then so is a behavioralist who's really good at understanding the motivations and specific observable, measurable behaviors that people are doing by watching or interviewing or asking. And yet, a futurist is also really good at generating insights. They can look at what's the next emerging socio-cultural, technological, environmental, or economic or political trend. And so I realized that, okay, well, let's adapt the best of those principles and say this is about insight generation. And then conversely, you could say, well, who's the best at coming up with ideas? You could argue an engineer, let's say, think of someone like James Dyson, the inventor of the Dyson vacuum cleaner. Great, solid, indestructible, practical ideas that really solve things. And then somewhere in the middle, you could put in a traditional designer where we're talking about aesthetics and beauty and experience and that type of stuff. So they're really good, those people, at generating ideas. And in the middle, we would have the user experience designer who looks at what is the intention, what's the impact, and whether there's a mismatch in communication, what needs to make sure so it's simple, seamless, and effortless to get the experience that you want. And then finally, ideas are totally worthless unless you commercialize. So you could think of someone like the project manager. Project managers already have innovative inherent skills because they've got to make sure they get the project built on time, on budget. There are so many different existing ways that we can become innovative. And I realize, I think I kind of understood that there was not one way to innovate. It's always about, hey, there's a lot of different principles out there, but let's cherry pick some of the best that are proven to work and use that. Sets me apart from all of my competitors in the real market is I understand there are obstacles. So behavioral obstacles, limiting beliefs, the number of people who I come across, leaders and managers that go, oh, I'm not creative. I said, really? What brought you to that idea? Well, I'm not in marketing, or other people are, we leave the ads to the creatives over our advertising agency. I said, well, why? You could strategically come up with ideas and save you a bundle. All you've got to do is to do that. And when you dive into how so many people have lost their natural innovative behaviors, we just go back to when we were children. Like when we were children, we were fearless, we were inquisitive, we were experimental, and we would try things we weren't supposed to try. We would eat things we shouldn't eat. We would draw where we shouldn't draw. And I just noticed, even with my daughter just the other week, that I noticed that she had got one of those coloring in books. And I thought, this is where it starts. You're only supposed to draw and color in the shape you're drawing. That's the first stage where it starts. No, 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 you're not allowed to draw outside of the box. And then when we get to school, it's yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, or it's black or white, it's right or wrong. They have innovative skills. And so part of my work really lies, apart from techniques, I mean, anyone can teach you a technique to do X, Y, Z, is understanding that everyone has usually some limiting beliefs, and how do we overcome them, and how do we deal with the self-talk that's saying, either I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not creative enough, I don't have the time to do it, it's too difficult, and go, you know what, let's boil it down, make it simple and easy, get runs on the board because you're already innovative. We just need to rekindle that, and that's when the magic happens.
Wow, so well said. And I have 1,000 questions for you. And what I think what really strikes me is that what you are a naturally curious person, and what you've sort of articulated, from yoga to writing a book to working with CEOs, from your sort of early design thinking principles, there's a lot of things melded in there that has obviously created who you are and your natural curiosity. I wonder, when you work with CEOs and leaders and you're trying to tackle those limiting beliefs, and really knowing that you've actually done that yourself time and time again, it looks like, how do you practically do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, the first thing that I get people to do, I mean, you can use traditional cognitive behavior therapy techniques, and sometimes, might delve into those things. But usually, all we need to do is to reframe a limiting belief. So, let's say I've got the limiting belief that I'm not capable of generating innovative marketing campaigns. Okay. And so what we could do is we could reframe that, and reframe that in that the sense that I have all of the capability, the capacity, and resourcefulness to learn how to become more strategic and more creative in my marketing strategies. And so there is a word, a movement in psychology. It was back into the 60s. It was called self-efficacy. It's a bit of a mouthful. But the concept of self-efficacy theory is that everyone is capable of learning and everyone is capable of improving. So if you reframe a limiting belief to one of, actually, you know what, I can learn, I can improve, instantly it starts to change that mindset of one of impossibility into one of possibility, but without being a Pollyanna thing like, I am the world's best, creative strategist. No, but I have the capacity, the capability and resourcefulness to learn. And other things that you can do along this. Is there anyone out there that you might know who is no smarter than you, no more motivated than you, who has been able to work this out? And chances are there always is.
And so I'll push a little further. When you call yourself an innovation expert, that is a bold title and a bold claim, and you have to have the confidence to wear that, right? Tell me what does that mean to you, and how do your potential clients react to their expectations of working with you?
Yeah, so I guess that title usually comes from, I think it was the Financial Review had labeled me as an innovation expert. I thought, well,
Wow,
okay. And
good
I think,
on you.
you know, just to digress a little bit, I think we are the world's worst critics for ourselves. If we were a boss, if we looked in our mind, that boss would be, being charged with bullying, being charged with abuse, the amount of things that our brains will say. And so the reason why I share that is that we put ourselves down. Sure, there's a few people out there that are very good at putting themselves up with the super ego, but usually their careers don't, that people see through that type of stuff there. But yeah, when you put in the groundwork and people realize that and respect that, you just go, okay, I deserve that. I'm worthy of that title. I mean, I've got, there's a few books here. I think I've got 4 books to my name that I've written over the years. And I don't share that from an egotistical perspective, but I kind of put it down that, if you believe in something, put it down. And here's the thing, like literally as soon as you start writing a book, you think, oh, this is no good. Who am I to write this? And the doubters, the self-doubt, the limiting beliefs start to pop in there. And you say, I don't really care about that. I think this is something worth sharing. And when you get past yourself, that's usually with a lot of things in success and commercial success as a leader and all of those things, is you've got to get past yourself. And I remember it just brings me back to a time I was working with IBM. We were running a program called the Subject Matter Experts Program, which was about helping leaders becoming thought leaders. And part of the challenge that they had was like, who am I to share a message? It's like, you have no idea how brilliant you are because you're stuck in this cubicle. You put yourself in this box. And as soon as you started to realize that if when you share your content, most people, the stuff that you are sharing is just so valuable, but it's the limiting beliefs, the self-talk that starts to lower that down. An open mind. And a cool little technique, I'd love to share this with you, is called the open mouth theory, OMT. I blogged about this many years ago. And to give you some context, I had this amazing respect for one of Australia's best business coaches. She's retired now. And I would always find when I'd catch up with her at a conference that she'd have her mouth open and she'd be listening and she'd be like this. And I just thought, being a curious guy, I thought, is there something wrong? Does she have a bad jaw? Has she got halitosis? Does she have a respiratory illness? And I thought, no, there's got to be something behind it. So I started to experiment when I'd be in a conversation that I would open my mouth a little bit, not like that. And I found I wasn't jumping to conclusion. I wasn't jumping to feel like I've got to say something. I wasn't butting in. I wasn't, closing what I thought would be the solution. And I remember talking to my chiropractor about it at the time, and he said, Nils, that's just in our mind, that's a circuit. And he said, what do you mean? He said, well, if you have a circuit of thinking, mouth is closed, you've got a circuit in how you're going to behave, how you're going to perceive a situation. And if you're opening that mouth, then you're breaking that circuit. So when I bumped into this woman, Roz, about, I don't know, 2 months later or something, at an event, I said, hey, Roz, look, I'm a bit weird, but I've made an observation, and please don't be offended by it. But notice when you're in a blah, 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 that you have your mouth open. Were you aware of it? She said, no. And I said, well, here's my theory on it. I think that you're opening to things. And she said, well, my intention for every conversation is to drop all pretense of what I know and be totally there present. But yeah,
That's a great story. And she was completely unaware that that's what she was doing.
but she had that total intention whenever she was going to have a conversation. And so when I run a workshop, I will bring that up with people at the start. Say, like if you see someone with their mouth, lips closed, and they're supposed to be listening, challenge them and say, open mouth, open mouth. And it really does. I mean, I use it at home with my family, my wife, my partner, because yeah, I find if I'm going into my preconceived ideas, my solutions already, my mouth's like this.
So true. I love that. I am going to adopt. Thank you. I've got a great tip. Now, tell me, with the companies and the leaders that are approaching you, can you just talk through a few of their most common challenges these days and how has that shifted over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it can change a little bit from industry to industry, obviously. But I think a big current problem that a lot of organizations are going through is cost of living is going up, which is affecting certain types of markets, certain types of industries. But there is definitely a sense of how do we do more with less? How do we get more out the door with less effort? And that's forever happening. That's like a recurring evergreen problem there. I think another one is about breaking business as usual. And this is really, really prevalent. Part of the reason why I created, a program called Breaking Business as Usual is that you'll find that a lot of companies will get growth and they plateau out. And it's not until something drastic happens or they're kicked up the backside that they go up and then they go down and that. And so what we're finding is a lot of leaders from, CEO will say, yeah, we've had growth, but we want to make that a bit more consistent and not so much up and down. And so part of that, when we work with the clients, is trying to help them understand that usually what's holding companies back from growth are friction points. And if we can identify the friction points, then we can unharness the growth. We can get more stuff. So we help them identify those things. We help them look at generating unconventional ideas because usually the conventional ideas have been done to death. And then we go, you know what, you're already doing good things. I mean, you wouldn't have had those pockets of growth if those things weren't good. How do we leverage either the thinking or the processes or the people behind them in other areas or upgrade them or modify them or adapt them so that we can leverage and accelerate other areas. So that area of breaking business as usual is one area where I'm finding a lot of companies have struggling with. I'm hearing a lot of the words now rebuild, where companies are saying we need to rebuild. So that could be that we need to rebuild our workforce, that whole post coronavirus pandemic that put people off. How do we deal with hybrid and back in workplace? How do we rebuild customer relationships? Some people are saying, how do we go about reinventing our thinking, reinventing our product? We've had this product for the last 10 years and it's getting tired. Then there are other companies that are really struggling with AI adoption. Funnily enough, I was just working today on a presentation for, believe it or not, the travel industry. With travel agents where they're feeling, oh, our careers are going to be taken by AI, and it's like, no, jobs. People are not being replaced by AI. People are being replaced by people who are using AI. And I think people have made this mistake of it's artificial intelligence versus it's actually augmented intelligence. And it means you can do the crappy stuff really fast without giving you those headaches and, oh my God, I hate my job, rather than bang, done. We do the quality time on the quality activities that really matter. One little thing that just popped in my mind, something that we're finding a lot of companies where they're getting leaders who are kind of missed out. So let's say, for example, you've got your big C-suite execs who do the amazing retreats. There might be a brand new manager, but there's the people in between who often get left out. They might have started and no one's given them any advice. One thing that is really, really powerful, and there's a concept called inclusive leadership. Now, you may or may not be familiar with it. And if you are, great. If you're not, the concept of inclusive leadership is that leadership means different things to different people. So for me, my leadership, understanding of leadership, apart from my training, has been in many ways shaped by the types of people I've worked with in the past, the experts I've been around. But for most of us, it's led by our first mentors or our leaders at work or our leaders at school, leaders in sport and community. And so everyone has their own version of what leadership should be. And the biggest challenge that a leader might have, excuse me, is that they go, here's what we've got to go and do. They think they're leading a certain way. But Amanda, you might be thinking, but I don't think a leader should be doing that. So inclusive leadership is going, Amanda, in my new role as a leader here, I'd love to understand what leadership means to you. Can you tell us, what do you think a leader should do? What does leadership mean to you? And, you share what that means to me. And I go, so thank you so much for sharing. Really, I had no idea that, these are some of the theories, the ideas that you had. Leadership for me means blah, 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 blah. So right then and there, we now have a starting point. Leadership to you means this is to me. And now there's a clearer communication behind that. And so as a leader, and whether you're emerging, whether you're an existing, whether you're a CEO or first leadership role ever, finding out and having that conversation with your team just changes the game. And what I love about this concept is that you can actually use the term inclusiveness or to any kind of topic. So I will use the topic of inclusive innovation. I'll say, so what does innovation mean to you, Amanda? Amanda, so what does, user generated content mean to you? Hmm. Oh, okay. Well, what does insight generation mean to you? What does blah, blah, blah? And when you understand the power of inclusiveness and just having those one-on-one conversations with people, life changes. It's just amazing how you get people, everyone on the same page. And it doesn't have to be, even if you're going to work with them, it could be just in a workshop. What does X, enter, put in subject, mean to you? Oh, this is what it means to me. And that just gets everyone onto the same page. So that's part of, the theory of what I'm always trying to do is let's break down the obstacles, because there are techniques out there. Everyone can do techniques, but it's like, how do you get people over those obstacles?
Yeah, amazing. It's almost like your open mouth theory in practice, right? That you're sparking awareness in people and giving them permission to be able to share their thoughts and feelings in a sort of more psychological safe environment. So I love that positioning. So I'm really curious. What I'm excited about your positioning as well, when you talk about being an innovation expert, you're also talking about the commerciality of generating ideas that will translate into revenue for the business. Can you talk us through what that actually means? And maybe if you've got some practical examples of how you've helped companies.
I'm working with a client and they're looking at any kind of engagement. I'm looking at what's going to give them a return of investment. So that return might be in time savings. It might be in terms of employee engagement or employee satisfaction. It might be in something, like a net promoter score. It could be around increase in sales and everything like that. And a long time ago, I realized that being creative for creative sakes is not useful to anyone. It's kind of like, hey, look, I've worked out a way of creating a way that you can drive the car from the back seat. Very creative, but is it commercial? No, it's kind of like it's a waste of time. So some of the ways that you can bring in any type of commercialization to start with is usually a leader. Probably, I think some research from MIT, or it might have been Harvard, excuse me for not remembering the specific study, at least for CEOs, found that 30%, 36% of their time is spent solving problems. And if you look down and just your average manager or leader, they are spending so much time solving problems. But here's the thing is that if you're going to work on an initiative or a project, I always get people say, validate first that it's a problem worth solving. Because often people say, I've got this idea to do X, Y, and Z. And I say, well, let's just validate that that is a problem worth solving. And that could be anything from, from an internal perspective, doing a quick little internal poll. Hey, I've noticed that there's a little issue with the blah, blah, blah process. It seemed to cost me, take me an extra 40 minutes to do that. Has anyone else noticed that this is a problem? Little poll, specific thing, problem, validated or not. Really easy. Or if it was external, I've got this idea for this new product or a new kind of concept out there. Let's create a dummy, what we call spoof landing page that talks about a fictitious product or solution that doesn't exist. Let's create a social media ad that talks about the problem and see how many people are clicking on the ad going to the site. Or we could even create a meetup or a little event where people are, willing to pay to go, hey, we're going to have a forum. And if I get, 100 people signing up to be a part of this forum, we can validate that it's a problem worth solving. That's a really cool thing. Probably most important before we build or try and create any project, then after that is, can we validate the market is willing to pay for the solution, or our organization be willing to fund the solution around that? And again, I think where most people go wrong is they bypass it's a problem worth solving. They bypass that the market might be willing to pay for it or our company will fund it. And they just start to build some expensive prototype or pilot program to show that they can solve what they think is a problem worth solving, which quite often it isn't. So that's one way you can ensure commerciality with your projects and your thinking or your initiatives. But the research shows by a woman, Dr. Heidi Halverson Grant, she used to be the professor at Columbia University, one of the world's leading motivational scientists, wrote an awesome book called Focus and sort of the amazing difference of focused motivation. But she worked out in the general population, we have 50% of the population have what's called a promotion focused motivation. They're motivated to gain, to win, to award, to promotion. The other 50% have what's called prevention focused motivation. They're motivated by avoiding mistakes, by preventing things from happening. 50-50 split in the general population. But when we shift to work, 90-10 becomes a split. 90% of us shift to prevention focused motivation. And I found this out the hard way, because I always used to try and pitch innovation around, hey, build a new product, a new income revenue stream, new selling products. And yet that was hitting this 90% of the people going, danger, danger, danger. And so by shifting the language or the understanding to something like, make sure your competitors don't steal market share, how to make sure that your competitor's product doesn't outsmart yours, how to make sure your competitor's marketing campaign doesn't overshadow your latest campaign X, Y, and Z. So it's about understanding that shift there. That okay, I've got to work with that linguistics, that type of mindset. Work in this. Even though you might not see it as a strength there, if people naturally, and we all naturally are fault finders, mismatches, looking for problems, work with that rather than against it. So, yeah.
So true. There's so much that you said there. Maybe there's just one area that I'll delve into, because I think creating awareness, process, etc., becomes part and parcel of, to your point, the individual and their own limiting beliefs and how they frame their view of the world. How can you best support individual change their way of thinking or be much more innovative?
So I think the most important thing to when I work with an individual, first thing is to help them understand that one, they've already got some latent creative, innovative abilities. You explain that really quickly. Hey, here's the reason why you might think that you're not creative. You've been taught to think within the box. And then essentially, if you can allow them to, once that they believe that change is possible and they agree that change would be valuable for them, then the next part is to give them an experience of that. So how can they experience that they've had a shift of something in their thinking straight away? So you might do it with a pressing problem. And one of the techniques that we work with straight away is to work on what I call the idea muscle. So let's say, for example, let's go with a marketing, it doesn't have to be marketing, but let's just say we're looking at a new marketing campaign. It's just, we're just on the threshold of going to spring for when we're recording this. So let's say we want to do a spring campaign. Now, the average person, the average leader would probably, if you said, let's write down some ideas for a new campaign idea for this, they'd probably get to about 5, 7, maybe hit around that 8, 9, 10 mark and then go. And then look around and go, what else is different? And that's all right. But if you were to stretch yourself and say, what if if you had to create, I want you to create 20 ideas right now, Amanda. I'm going to put some music on my phone that we're working with you, and just, there's no such thing as a bad idea, but I want you to get to 20 ideas. And I know that when you get to idea 16, 17, you're going to feel like giving up, but I want the 20 ideas. And it's only until people start to get past that, oh, but I've only got 5. Oh, there's 10. Keep going. Oh, 12, 13, 14, 15. And then when they get to those 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, that is usually where the gold lies. But we've never been taught, because we're inherently, the mind is looking for the perfect idea. We've got to get past that. You've got to get the bad or the lame ideas out before you can get that genius. So that's just a couple of ways. So give people an experience, help them to understand that they've already got these skills. Get over yourself, believe in yourself, give them an experience. And then most importantly, think strategically. So say, for example, one of the things that we will do very often with the client is go, okay, I want you, depending on the time frame, let's say I want you to imagine, Amanda, it's 90 days from now. And I want you to look back over the last 90 days since we last met. And I want you to think of all of the activities, the progress that you've made that has just made you feel as if it is totally happy with your progress over those 90 days. Now, what were the key problems specifically that we had to eliminate or we overcame? What were the capabilities that we managed to maximize? And what were the opportunities that we seized? Let's go into them specifically. And then I would get someone to share all of those problems that they need to overcome. And I go, okay, so you got 10 or 12. Feel your pain. I can see why you're feeling a bit overwhelmed and stressed out. Let's prioritize them, and we'll rank them so we get the top 3. Okay. Now let's go to those capabilities that we want to maximize. Okay, 5, but what would be the top 3 of them? And then what opportunities can we seize? Okay, you've got 7. What would be those top 3? And doing an activity like that gives people confidence, it gives them clarity, and it gives them certainty.
Amazing. My final question for you is, what does thriving in work life mean to you, Niels?
I love that question. And I'm just going to preface it with one thing that I have noticed in probably the last 7 years, maybe a little bit less. There has been a huge inroad into, you would call it a profession. Some people call them employee engagement. Employee satisfaction is such a big, crucial role, not only for retention, but attraction, getting rid of attrition. And the things that keep popping up there. I was working with a client the other day, winner of, best employee of, employer of blah, blah, blah industry. And the reason why these companies are doing so well is that they realize that a person isn't a worker. Um, Employee is someone who is a person. They've got a heart, they've got a mind, they've got a soul or spirit, and they want to belong to part of a community. Things that we often forget nowadays is people are growing up in so many broken families that for younger generations, they see their work unit as an extension of their family. Some older people out there might not believe that, but that's a fact and it's proven quite a number of times. But I think for me, thriving, as you might know with my background, well-being might sound very astral, but if you're not sleeping well, I mean, the research shows that lack of sleep can impair your judgment more than being over the limit from drinking. So, if you want to look at your employee engagement or employee output levels, are my people getting enough sleep? What affects sleep? Stress, tension, workload. I mean, I came across this the other day with a client where they were going, well, there's an expectation that we have to do X, Y, and Z. We just don't have the time for it, and it's like they couldn't feel like they were in a safe space. I mean, you mentioned in our chat today psychological safety. That's a really important part as well. Emotional connection. There's also the sense of the younger generations have been, as much as people have thrown rocks at your Gen Zs. They're doing more community work than us oldies have ever done before. And that's a really rewarding thing. I've had the great fortune of working with a company, I'm not going to mention their name, who had a great initiative where they had their own leaders. I think there was about 10 leaders, and they were kind of like to become quasi like mentors to, there was, I think, 6 non-for-profits that sort of had a bit of a crossover. It was a crossover from what the company was doing. And so they had people like me come in and share expertise. Body is a huge thing as well. Mindfulness, awareness, meditation. There are so many cool things out there, and I see this a lot with organizations around it. I think there's a bit of a challenge around in not being not so much inclusivity. There are some people who they might feel excluded. Let's say if someone has a larger weight issue, they might feel like, well, this isn't for me. And so it's a matter of making sure that, if it's not a physical thing that we can do for them, how can we help them emotionally or mentally? Is there activities we can teach them about resilience? Is there things we can teach them about?
Thank you, Niels. That was such an enlightening interview. I find you've earned your stripes as far as innovation expert, and I find your curiosity and your capacity to sort of learn from others, you know, amazing. And
Oh,
so I really enjoyed speaking to you. And Niels is someone who's on the platform on Dear Thrive, where you can actually spend some time with him. He's obviously got lots of deep knowledge. I've certainly enjoyed our conversation. So thank you, Niels. Take care.
thank you for having us, and feel free to reach out to me if you want to do a session with me, because that's what we're here for at Dear Thrive.
Thank you.